Afternoon everybody. This is the completed, very latest Ferrari Meccano Maker System set. I think of the whole look of this model, which it is really more than a toy, it doesn't look too bad. There's places where it can be improved in the looks, I think. Certainly by using some metal flexible parts it would look better. You could fill in the gaps a bit more, but on the whole, certainly the front anyway, most of the front, it looks good. Reasonably good. Don't bother. It's an awful set. That is the short story. Save your £80 or £90 that they currently are at the moment and buy something a lot easier to do and something that actually works. That's the short story. I've emailed Meccano about it. If you want to stick around to find out what's wrong with it, well, stick around. So beyond the rather pleasing on the whole aesthetics of the model, although I think it could be better, there are two major areas that are, well, a complete failure as the model is. We'll come on to that in a bit, but we'll start with the basics if you like. The build time is 11 hours 11 minutes. Of course, as usual folks, that includes me making notes. Not always being built when you're at the freshest of the day. This was built bit of a mixture really, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes late at night, early hours of the morning. So yeah, you can take a bit off for that. But let's say, oh, of course I made a few mistakes myself, let's say 10 hours. The instructions are poor. The white outlining that has recently been improved as well, with the addition of the white outlining in the parts contents list, the inset parts content lists of the each individual stage, the parts you require. That starts and very soon disappears, making it back to the black plastic blob. What's that? The instructions, although divided up nicely into like 3 or 4 on a page, are far too small, mainly because they nearly always tend to show you the whole chassis or the whole body when you're only doing a little bit. So, I don't know, out of, I'll just pick something at random, say, let's say you've got a stage. The stage is the bodywork, so you usually have a little grey inset picture next to the inset parts required list for that stage. And let's say we're doing the body, so there's a picture of the body, and most of it will be greyed out, but there'll be a section of it will be in the colour of the body, in the red. So let's say you're going to be doing the front end, so you might have all this, or just one corner here, lit up red, so you know that's the bit you're doing. Then what you would probably expect is that you might get in the diagram itself, say all of this front section, or maybe half of the front section, so more or less a quarter if you like, and you'll be concentrating on these few parts, or 1 or 2 parts and 1 or 2 nuts and bolts. Nah, forget it. You generally get the whole thing, and then because of that you get a very small image for the bit you're actually doing, and that goes throughout not every stage, but a lot of it, a lot of the model. It's got to be half, it's probably even more than that, and you don't need it. You need blow-ups. There are awkward angles to recreate, and you'll find that when you look at a diagram, the one that springs to mind, and it's probably the easiest to show you here, you're coming to do the windscreen frame. Now you may not be able to see through the tint. Let's open a door. You do have opening doors, and they're not bad actually, the doors. They do come together quite nice. Don't ask me if that's exactly as they open on the real thing. I have had to do some research looking at pictures and a bit of video of the real thing to work out some of the angles, and that's the problem. And this is an example of it, because inside, let's see if we can get in here. Let's have a look. Yeah. Here you've got a 3L narrow strip at an angle and it forms one side of the windscreen frame. There's one on the other side. But in the instructions, you see the back, you should probably see the back wheel moving around there. That's one of the major problems. We'll come on to that. So, put the door down a bit. This windscreen frame, the actual instructions being fitted show the windscreen sticking out here. That way. And there's several things like that that make you think and consider and in the end guess which way things are going to go. Now, that ain't a brilliant example because you've only got to look at the shape of the car and you can probably work that one out. So that one ain't so much of a problem. It's easy to work out, follow the line of the windscreen. But there's other more complicated areas where you're thinking, oh dear, and it's trial and error. Too much trial and error. The shape does recreate the real thing quite well overall. Of course it is Meccano and we want nuts and bolts, so it is a bit coarse if you like. The use of these pushing pins, these quick snaps like we've got there, there's several on the bonnet, there's some around the rear here. Now they do have a cheap look in part. They do work very well on this model, they clip in very positively and they do smooth out the flow a little bit. But in some places I think it's a waste of time. I suppose the real answer would be red anodised bolt heads or bolts. Would have been the better way to do it, I suppose. But overall the plastic parts are fairly well made. Some of the larger ones look a bit coarsely cut out or whatever they stamped out or whatever they're doing. The thicker parts, such as these door pieces, they're very well made and the slotted holes are angled as well inside. They've got a good construction of those, really well finished. The flip-flop parts are, well, they're flip-flop parts, they do the job, the paint doesn't split off, but there is a certain, I don't think cheapness is the right word, that's doing it a bit of a disservice, but it just doesn't look quite the part, I suppose. Of course I've mentioned my thoughts on those really in other videos. The build, I say, is very long. It is not assisted by the guesswork that is many. There's a lot of guesswork. You start with a chassis, which is a pretty good way of going about things. Now if it had a motor, or we start with a motor, it makes it easier. That's another gripe. It needs a motor. Let's round up the angles thing, because I could be on it all day, pointing out the different problems and that. But in the end, I had to look at the internet to look at the real thing to get an idea of the angles of parts of the vehicle. Some of that was the rear. This section here, is it upright? Is it sort of curved? Now of course on the real thing this is much more curved. Can you see the axle coming out? There's a reason for that. That's not coming out because of the problems with the model, that's because I've only just shoved it in. And I've only just shoved it in to display because of the problems. But I'll sort that out in a bit. So to get an idea of the angles, yes, that goes back a little bit, okay, yeah. And to get an idea of how things are with the car. Now there are some nice little touches to attention to detail, some of which I didn't really realise until I looked on the internet for the real images. The wheels are nice. Now not all the wheels, they're a bit more shiny than that in real life, but they're the right shape. We've got the nice end caps, the stickers on the end, the Ferrari stickers, a prancing horse. And the shape overall pretty good. The front is a lot better than the rear, I think. From the model point of view, it seems to me the front they've took a lot of time over, but not enough, and the rear they've got fed up, I think. Several areas I think they've got fed up. They probably haven't, but that's how it feels. Looking at the rear of the car, I was in a few two minds. It's far too open for my liking. It's far too skeletal. Now that might be very traditional. Well, it is. There's a lot of imagination used in the very early stuff. You know, there was no flexible plates and things like that. But there's a mistake here, which stops you putting it together. these bolts here on the side that hold the exhausts, the double exhausts, and the bolt inside there that holds the light, which is only 1 bolt fixing. There's several 1 bolt fixings, some of which they have been sensible and used nylock nuts to help them stay tight, and the construction of the rear here underneath with double angled strips there, they're all nylock nutted, because you've got to twist them basically at different angles. Like this leans further back than the mounts for these corner sections. But the instructions show, I know it's easy to show you, but let's take the axle out because we know it's going to fall out anyway. Yeah, that's better. So we'll go here. This bolt is shown fitted the other way around there, with the head this side, which prevents this bolt being fitted in straight, and it's over here, no good. Take it apart. And also, while you're doing all this, because this is not nylock nutted for the to support the brake light, that keeps coming undone. I've took them apart about 3 or 4 times to get that tight and in position. And talking of positions, what positions are they? Are they angled in slightly or upright? Again, check the internet. Shouldn't have to do that, should you, folks? The engine is okay, but it's not secured in very well. It's a 1 bolt fixing across there, and the I'll try and show you. No, I'll leave that a minute. But the engine, you can see through the gap there. That engine is not really secured. This is all folded, and it's only the nylock nuts here that keep it all together. I think you'll agree there's quite a bit of space there, especially if that wasn't there, to put an motor. Batteries are a problem, but this was my thinking. Generally these sort of things are not going to be running very long. If there was a motor in, you know, you set it going, somebody at the other end catch it, turns it round, that sort of thing. Well, I thought it is going away from Meccano a little bit. You use a Meccano motor, but you use a 9 volt PP3 or calculator battery as we know it as. Use that in there, that should go in. Might be a bit ugly, but you might be able to hide it at the front, because there's quite a bit of room there as it is at the moment. Talking of the front, there should be a panel there. On the real thing there's a panel there. Why not put it on this one? There's very little to see with regarding this very minimal suspension here that doesn't really do a lot, and it can't do a lot. Before we go on to one of the major issues, let's have a look at the chassis. It is quite a neat construction, and it's a decent construction, to be honest, overall. This part of the build, which is the first, the chassis images are pretty good, but you do have to take your time, and that's the thing with this model. To have a chance, take your time. And as in, well, many Meccano models really, and perhaps 90% of this one, you're going to end up leaving nuts and bolts not quite tight. So for the next stage you can make sure everything is where it should be in the correct angle, and then tighten them all up. So you'll have a lot of that with this, especially the body. But the chassis on the whole is pretty good. And you know, if you look at this model you think, oh, it's all plastic, and I can't deny that. It's sort of it looks like it's all plastic, but it's actually not. The chassis is quite involved. There's a lot of metal, although it's the 1/4 inch hole space stuff, a lot of it. There's a lot of metal in the chassis. We have nice seats. This is the base off here. They're quite simply made up from the thick plastic strips, and they're very effective, very good looking. But they would have been even better if they had a nylock nut to fit them, and then you could adjust them easier. And you do have to adjust them, because again it's part of the guesswork. I'll just show you those seats before we go any further. They are quite nice looking seats, and quite effective in a basic way. I like that, where some basic parts have been used to create something that's quite good looking, and I say it's exact to the real thing, but it is quite nice. Right then, major issues. I'm going to have some tea. Could be a long one, folks. Nice. Right, angles. As you can see, as I've said, there's many an angle to recreate, many a curve to recreate, or at least in part. First up, well, let's have a positive. On the real thing, the lights are here and here. Now this day and age, I think a nice sticker would be nice there, and it would. It'd be a bit more stand-outish, if you like. But there's a gap here that nicely represents the lights in a way. I like that. But to get to this stage, short story is, you get so far, slacken off a load of bolts, because you need to have them tight to hold the shape to start with. And yes, once you've done one side, the other side's easier. But underneath here, there's a small, narrow fish plate. And to get that to reach across there at an angle, it's nowhere near. So it's a case of undo that bolt, 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 and really pull it over. But you can't pull on it too much, because then you start pulling these in and you'll lose the shape completely. So get it over, get the bolt in, tighten it up, tighten everything else up. Same this side, but I suppose once you've got experience of that side, this side's easier. What else while we're looking at the front? Yes, when you put these narrow angle brackets together, they don't fit flush back to back because of the thickness of the paint, and there's not enough leeway in the system. Therefore they push apart, and when you tighten them up in the middle, it curves this slightly. I suppose there is rather a large gap between the front valance and the wheel anyway, which there wouldn't be on the real thing. That is a little ugly. I've mentioned about there ought to be a plate there. The windscreen, I know why they do this really. The windscreen isn't on, and that goes on towards, well, towards the endish, not right at the end, but all the structure for it is already in place, and then you have to take these two bolts out. I mean, I've never had that before on a set model. Take these two bolts out to fit it, but it does not show you where the windscreen goes at the bottom. Does it go inside, as indeed it does, and you find that out by looking on about half a dozen stages, or on the outside? You might say that's easy to work out, but I've been there before. Oh, that must go there, and then it doesn't for whatever reason. Guesswork again. Right, now, major issues. You may have noticed the first one, well, it's actually one of the last ones, which is the rear axle, but we'll start at the front as we're already there. Can you see a problem here? Can you see a problem just here with the tyre hitting the wheel arch? Can you see the problem when I go like this? I know the surface isn't a perfect surface, but can you see there's that much play in the system that the tyres and the wheels are sort of going like that, going splayed. The suspension is a nice idea. There wouldn't have been a lot anyway, because they've used 14.7mm bolts, and it really means there's most of the play in the, or rather most of the suspension, I should say, the spring itself is minimal. But if we turn underneath, these new parts, these new plastic parts, I know it's difficult for you to see here, but if you check out the set review video, you'll see a few of those. These new plastic ball and socket parts, quite novel, quite good. As I said in the other video, not very good for much power through them. But there's no support. There's no support here for the wheels. It's far too lanky. What doesn't help it, why the wheels fitted to the steering mechanism itself. It's a bolt straight through with an eye-lock nut on the end. And when you're doing this, all the bodywork's on. You have to feed the spanner through here, and it's awkward trying to get the adjustment right. Too tight, no good. So there's far too much play. That should have been a stud, which would be difficult because you can't get it in to put the Allen key on there. So the panel pin type axles maybe would have been a better idea. So there's too much play in the actual pivot of the wheel. There's far too much play up and down to give free movement. You have to have quite a bit of play. Too much play there. There's too much play in the whole system. The actual fitting of the well, they're more like prop shafts really than track rod ends, I suppose. But anyway, inside inboard, I missed that because the image is so small and dark because of the lack of white outlining where they went. So overall, there is far too much play in this system for the steering. There is no room for the suspension to work anyway. The play isn't taken up in the system to allow the suspension to be needed, really. And of course all this sags, and I dare say that something will catch on the chassis because it sits so low anyway, because it's the type of car it is. So that needs a total redesign. That is absolutely rubbish. I may dispense with the steering altogether, I don't know. At the moment my heart's not in it to even improve the model. Why? Because we've got another issue, and it's the rear axle. Well, to be honest, there's several issues. I mean, I've had models that, or set models, toys, creations, whatever you want to call them. I've had models that have been complete failures, and some I haven't reviewed and done a video on. There's a very old 20 model sit on lawnmower, which is great, except for it lacks one pulley on the drive, which means the band moves up and down and gets trapped or jammed or doesn't grip. And there's a tractor in a 30 or 35 model set, fastest tractor in the world, but due to the power takeoff on the back for driving machinery, it just falls up. Well, it jams up, full spot jams up. I suppose due to the amount of videos I've got to do and projects are ongoing, I just haven't got around to doing them. But whilst those are failures that with just one grommet can be fixed, I've probably said this before, I don't call a model or a set a failure if you can get round, or not a total failure, if you can get round it with the parts in the set. You can't with this. You can't. The steering's awful. It's pointless. It doesn't go anywhere anyway, even if it could. But the rear axle is very annoying. I suppose give Meccano the due with these hubcaps to neaten the ends. That's great, but it's created a problem. I haven't measured the axle, but we have known in the past axles being cut too long, poorly cut, too short. I don't think this is a problem itself really. It's just that this has to be so accurate. And with Meccano, with the leeway you've got in the system, with the holes, and you've got a bit of play in the holes, especially with the triaxle as you got there, but you know, sometimes that leeway can be a problem, sometimes it can be great. Now here what you do, you put the required amount of spacers on. I think I've got it right, but don't quote me on it because it looks a bit too far inboard, but you put the right amount of spacers on here. I thought it was 3 large plastic spacers, 1 small, but anyway, you put the required amount in, and when you do that you put rubber grommets on the end, but there is not enough overhang for the rubber grommets to grip on, and thus when it's together and the hubcap's on, you don't lose the rubber grommet, I'll give him that, but it falls apart. I moved it a longer forward and back a few inches, picked it up, and it was like the axle exploded, went everywhere. I lost one of the collars, sorry, not collars, the spacers, the large spacers, and there's enough spares. There's quite a few little spare parts here and there, some smalls and stuff. So that was useless. So I messed around with the amount of spacers, and yes, you can get it so the axle stays on. I mean, just a simple thing, remove 1 plastic spacer each side, but that would give you far too much axle sticking out, the wheels too far inboard to look anything like decent, and then you won't be able to get the hubcaps on. Complete redesign needed there. Don't know what yet. I was thinking of a few things, but if I'm going to put a motor in it, it does restrict me slightly, but shouldn't have to worry about that. The motor is different because that's an addition, although there should have been a motor in this set. I think time has come to develop a 3 or 6 volt motor, but still able to be fitted in by using nuts and bolts with a bracket of some description, but smaller. So that's got to be redone. Whilst I'm at the back, this is a niggle more than anything, but when you're going to create a licensed model, and I don't know how happy Ferrari are going to be about this, I really don't. I mean, yes, any human can make mistakes, but the time I've took over this thing, it ought to be perfect. It cannot be perfect. These shapes here on the real thing, they're black. Considering all the effort they've gone to other things with the red parts, the red metal parts, plastic parts, trying to make it look a bit more of a flowing smooth model with the pushing quick snaps. Why don't you just have these in black? I know it's a little thing, but really? And it's one of them things that says, yeah, you just got fed up, didn't you? It's just what it feels like. So what have we got then? We've got the real bad design of the rear axle, which I'll take out because it's only going to fall off. The front steering suspension space. The steering is pointless as it is designed. I suppose you could call this a bit of an overview of what I'd do to it to make it better, or what needs changing. A panel in there because there's nothing to see. Panel in there to fill the body up nicely. The doors, they're not bad actually. They ain't much to make. They require quite a bit of adjustment to get the right angle so they can shut properly. And of course, the model itself, I mean, these probably need pushing forward a little bit more actually on the angle, but they pivot on a hinge there, like that. And then there is an eye-lock nut mount as well, so it allows it to swing as well, which is pretty good because when I first come to put it in, you could probably see it a little bit here. The windows was above the door and I had to bend those slightly. Me, I don't like bending parts. I had to bend those slightly so they go in. So the model, there's a bit more of a gap here. I say the model, the box model pictures, which are probably prototypes anyway. So it wants a bit of tweaking. It has travelled a few miles now, back home and what have you. Yeah, I need to adjust that door again, I think. So the doors, although I'll have a look in a bit to see how they do open and close, but they're not too bad. A good effort, we'll say. The structure of the door, the bottoms, is quite nice. Using nylock nuts to make sure things don't come undone occasionally, which happens in the model here and there. That's a good idea. That's a nice way of doing it. But the rear, I find, is pretty poor. Now, not knowing much about the car, yes, we've seen Top Gear and other programs on the internet, on YouTube and what have you. I thought, well, this isn't a bit. It's a bit open, a bit there. From looking at pictures, that's supposed to represent. I say supposed to. I'm guessing it's supposed to represent the actual active wing being up. The rear of the car, the bonnet or the hood, if you're in the States, is the rear because it's a rear engine car. Although I dare say the real one's probably slightly towards mid-engined, but anyway. So you can open the bonnet. There you are. That's it. That's all you can do. What's the point? What is the point of that? Basically, you've got a cross member here. A metal strip it is. It's in black. Which, going back to these parts down here, if you can put a black narrow strip in, why can't you put black with these ones? Anyway, this cross member here, that is pretty important in the structure of this bonnet. As you lift it up, it comes into contact with this and can't go anywhere. So that really needs getting rid of, really. This upright sort of, it's U-shaped really, like that. It goes all the way around there. That, again, the angle of that right, and the parts that come off it now, I don't know if I can show you this, probably better underneath here, through the wing. These plastic parts here, pointless. You can't work out where the angles go. It's a black blob because there's no white outlining of all this construction here, and in the end they're pulled right back, actually, quite way back, and you can't see them from above. Some things you think, well, some things you've tried and there was no need, some things you haven't tried and there was definitely a need. So there you are. I think that's about it. Oh yeah, classic. We supposedly got steering. Well, it's perhaps a good job the steering doesn't really work due to the play and the clearance issues. Now, depending which country you're in, and I don't know if these are just left-hand drive anyway, the real things, but we're going to have a look inside the car now. You may have noticed it already. If you look in there, this is a right-hand drive. Well, it would have been. Now steering wheel. So you think, oh, it must be on the left-hand side, because it's Italian, of course. Oh, look, no steering wheel either. Yet you've got a rack in there, a small rack. Can we see it? Can we see it? Well, you can see the below it. Oh, this is very difficult. just up there, there's a very small rack. So why haven't we got a steering column and steering wheel? Which again points to, oh, we couldn't be bothered. And also, you know, I was on about nylock nuts. Well, that one needs tightening up a bit more. But yeah, I mean, if you put it at an angle like that, let's put a stupid axle in at the back. Don't look too bad. It needs some filling here, a little bit. Perhaps at that angle it's not so bad anyway, it's a bit more side on it is. The doors open up on the face of it quite nicely. A little bit fiddly. The seats are nice. Could be better with the nylock nuts on those. The front overall is a nice shape. But to get there, oh, and what was this, 80, 90 quid? Can't remember now, one or the other. It's one of the more expensive sets. So if you haven't watched the first bit, first 10-20 seconds, I'll repeat it. Don't bother. Really don't bother unless you've got plenty of parts and the time and the inclination to sort it out yourself. Now if somebody's bought this set and such a model will have appeal in some ways to a different set of people. It will have appeal perhaps to just Ferrari fans who fancy having a go at building it. And they'll get so far and they'll chuck it in the box and they'll put it in the cupboard or slap it on eBay for whatever they can get for it, and it will not be completed. It's only us, well, if I've been polite, enthusiasts, Meccano enthusiasts that is, there's going to have even, well, the parts for a start. Unless you've got several sets, there's no way you're going to be able to sort this out. Right folks, I dare say I've been going on too long. The short story is, as I've said before, don't bother. Let's hope the little one's better, because it's one thing having problems with a set, and we shouldn't have, or the instructions for that matter, but when you've paid less money for something, it's an easier pill to swallow. We shouldn't have to, because sets like this are just going to damage things, and like most things, you're only as good as the last set you produced or last set you sold. Don't matter how good other things have come, when you come back to this, we've got progress with the instructions, with the better laying out, with slightly larger, slightly clearer instructions, the white outlining, and with this we've gone back. Now this is a French set. Meccano, obviously a lot of the parts are a lot bigger than this, so therefore by default the images tend to be a lot clearer. That's a Chinese set. The zinc plating in general in the Chinese stuff is better. This one though, pretty good, I must say. The zinc plating is pretty good. You do find some parts are a bit more dull on one side than the other, and it lacks, the smaller parts certainly lack the Meccano stamp. But that's sort of a given these days. There's not so much the stamping, or the stamping's a bit weak, or the zinc's not good. The zinc on this ain't bad actually. But there does seem to be more Chinese made sets better than the French sets. I don't know where it falls down at the beginning or the end, in between, but something isn't right. I'm going to have some more tea now folks. See you again.